Olivia, you are live. What's going on?
Hi, I'm a trans woman, and I've been transitioned for quite a few years, not quite, but a few years now. And my main issue is these days is I don't I feel like an imposter still. And I have brain worms from gender criticals, from just the entire debate. And it really affects my life. And I don't know how to get over it, how to stop that, how to just move on and, believe in myself and that I'm a woman. And, that's a complex situation as to why, did conversion therapy make me trans? I just roll around these silly ideas in my head endlessly. And everyone tells me, oh my gosh, you're so pretty. And no one knows unless I tell them. And it still doesn't matter. I'm hanging out with my cis friends and I just feel other still.
Right. So my solution to this was to, and I don't necessarily recommend this to everyone, I only recommend this to a certain type of person, but my solution was to go brawling with gender critical people and just go and find out. And they told me some stuff and it ate away at my brain and I ended up agreeing with some of them. And then I saw other trans people arguing with them and I saw the arguments, and it took me months and months of thinking and really aggressively front on facing their arguments. And I have got to the position I am in now. And that has really helped me be secure in it. I found the reason I wanted to do that is because I noticed that when I was first coming out as an atheist, and also when I first got into her metal and considered myself a metalhead, I was really insecure about both of those things. And I knew that because every time anyone said anything about it, I felt like I had to argue. I felt like I had to defend myself. I felt like, insecure, surrounded by people who didn't believe me and all this kind of stuff. And I got to the point on both of them where I just didn't even think about it anymore and I just didn't care. But it took a long time. It took years on both of those two things. And I always found it kind of funny comparing being a metalhead, being a trans woman and being an atheist, because in one sense they were totally different and music taste is just meaningless compared to the stress of transition. But they were all identity things, and they were things that took me a long time to just get to the point where I'm secure in it. And so I think my first thing would be forgive yourself for taking time. That's fine. You could take years, literally years. It took me maybe 5 years in transition before I got to the point where I wasn't constantly stressing about something all the time, some gender critical argument that I didn't necessarily know if I had an answer to. Now I do. I haven't found any arguments that I'm unsure about how to resolve them or whatever. And I guess another thing, particularly in imposter syndrome, is that, fake it till you make it is definitely true, but that's not necessarily the best way to describe it. If you are saying I want to fit in with other women and then saying just fake it, and fake's a bad word for when you're talking about a trans women. But
I think you
sorry, pardon?
I was just gonna say, I think you'd be surprised how many cis women are also faking it till they make it. It's not a uniquely trans thing to be oh, I'm not feminine enough, I'm not getting along in this situation and the socially right way for women. That is something all women struggle with. If anything, it could be almost affirming in one sense.
That is true, but I do think there's one aspect that I dealt with for a while, which is, am I a real woman? And that was something that I didn't think other cis women...
Yeah, that's getting to me. Am I a real woman?
Right. So my position on this...
I really go on in.
Sorry, go ahead.
But it's just, I go on in I watch, and you get brought up a lot in the people that I watch and I interact with. And it's just the ones that really have gotten to me, two main ones. I broke up with my girlfriend because she's a lesbian and they didn't want to be a rapist. It got into my brain and I just ended a relationship over it. So that's on my mind. But when I was a kid, I had therapy over being trans, and they got me to desist. And the way they got me to was to molest me and say that, if you want to be a girl, you'll accept this and you can escape by saying you're a boy. And I did. And forever, real girls can't do that. And I'm stuck with that. I don't want to be stuck with that for the rest of my life, but I still am. I mean, I transitioned like 8 years ago, and it eats at my brain.
Well, I'm really sorry to hear that you had that experience. That sounds, horrible. How
do I cure myself?
So in terms of, oh, sorry, did you want to say something, Arden? Or?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think like when we have like obsessive thoughts like this, it's like it's kind of like when we're talking about like the distinction between like dysmorphia and like not seeing an accurate version of yourself in the mirror. Like no matter how many times the people in your life affirm you, like, oh no, you're beautiful, like you passed. No, that's not a distracting feature. It's not a flaw. It almost reinforces the like, well, they could be lying to me sort of thing. I think honestly, one way that can help it is to kind of sit in like okay, what if I accept their premise for a second? Maybe I'm not a real woman, right? Does that mean anything about my life is going to change? Does that mean I'm going to change the way I look? Does that mean I'm going to change the restroom I use? Does that mean when I check out, the person at the checkout counter, the clerk is going to say suddenly, sir, because I agreed with them that I'm not a real woman? No, they're still going to say ma'am. They're still going to do X, Y, and Z. And like, even if like you don't pass, I still think it still is helpful to like, sit in the like, what if they're right? Even if they're right, nothing about my life changes. I go about my life in the exact same way. The only thing is like the like non-physical way of how we describe the reality of the situation is different. But that doesn't matter. Like you're still you. You're still like, this is kind of why when people also call in asking about like, oh, I'm being timid about taking my first step towards transition. Well, we often talk about the like, break it down. It's like, you're not dipping into a pool that you have to swim down forever. Like think about the things that are going to make you more comfortable in your body. Like those are the real, like the reality of the situation, the things that will improve your quality of life. And while I think it can maybe in the short term, like make your symptoms worse, because like you have to then sit with that feeling, maybe I'm a fake woman or something for a little bit. I think in the long run, it can actually really be alleviating, because even if they're right, it doesn't matter, you're still you, and and in reality they're wrong. So like that's like the 1-2 punch of the benefit is like, even if they're right, it doesn't fucking matter, and they're wrong. So like, yeah. I don't know if that's helpful.
I was going to say, I think like I agree with Arden there. I guess my answer to the question that I kept asking myself of, what if I'm not a real woman? The answer that I've come to is like, I don't care. Whatever you mean by real woman, whatever spiritual or magical or like thing that means, I literally just don't give a fuck. What I care about is that people treat me not well, with respect. My friends all include me and treat me like everyone else. And I'm minimizing my dysphoria as much as I can and just living the life that I want to live. And if like I die and there's a God and it was real all along, it's like, mate, you wasted all the time doing atheist calling shows. I was real all this time. And then it's like, by the way, you weren't a real woman. Like, to who? Like, what do I care? What does that even mean? I mean, there are some things that, maybe if I had magic powers, I would change. Perhaps I would change it so that I could have my own children or something. But that's not what makes a real woman anyway. Like there are some things, in transition, we change things. They're the important things. But this like category of like real woman or like, this mystical stuff that gender criticals pretend they don't think, but go on about all the time about, realness. It just garbage. It's like, it's not something that actually affects me. And then I guess my other point,
meant to be a trap.
Yeah.
And not to,
and it's
kind of a pun almost, not on purpose, but sorry.
Yeah. I guess my other thing to add is, it sounds to me like you are consuming a lot of gender critical content. And that is, coming from me, this is kind of meaningless, but that can be at least a form of self-harm. Like for me, part of my cure, and this is how my brain works. I'll go in and I'll engage with gender critical stuff, and I'll accept all their premises briefly about the realness of women and all this kind of stuff. And then I draw a line under it, and I go to the pub, or I go around my friend's house or something, and I just exist as a person. And I don't let myself think, oh, what if I'm not a real woman or anything? And it cures it for me, because all of the things I actually care about, I'm getting. But I've been in times, for example, in lockdown, I didn't have that. All I had was being trapped in the house. And so I ended up constantly consuming all this gender critical stuff. And even though I didn't believe it, it's so constantly dehumanizing, and there's propaganda, and propaganda eats away at you, even if it's false. You need to understand for you what your limit on consuming this stuff is before it starts affecting your mental health. And if you're if you are insecure and there's a gender critical argument, you're like, shit, I think they're right. Well, call into this show and argue it with me. Or maybe they're right. Maybe they're right and you just have to accept it. Or maybe you need to call off and take some space from it and come back to it another time. Or maybe it doesn't matter. Like, there's only so much of this stuff that you can eat before it makes you sick. And that's true for all of us. And it's definitely true for me. And I do too much of it, and I'm quite good at it. And I'm not trying to boast, but like, there's only so much gender critical stuff you can consume before it's going to hurt you, because it's designed to hurt you.
That was really helpful in that both of you totally got through to me. I am consuming far too much, and yeah, it doesn't really matter, honestly. I'm not trying to make some ontological claim. I just want to be happy.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And like, lots of it comes down to these like ontological claims. And I think that, like you were saying about breaking up with a girlfriend because of like, these gender critical ideas. I mean, really, your girlfriend, you were kind of making a decision, or your ex-girlfriend, you were kind of making a decision for her. You were saying, I think you are being violated here or losing something here or something. But I mean, maybe if you were keeping a secret from her, that could have been true. Maybe you could have told her, like, just say she didn't know you were trans and you told her, and then she was like, oh, I don't like this at all, I want to break up. Okay. But if she does know and you're like, oh, there must be something that she just doesn't understand, it's bad for her, I need to break up because that's the best thing for her. That is like projecting gender critical views onto her that she probably doesn't share. And that's kind of like taking away her autonomy, I guess, in a sense. I'm not I don't know enough about your relationship to say, but what I would say is,
yeah,
if you're having worries in a relationship, it's important to talk about them. And that's my general relationship advice. And you could say to your partner, just like, are you worried? Do you worry that I'm a trans woman and not a cis woman? Do you feel like that makes me not a real woman? And they might say, don't care, mate. Or they might say, no. Or they might say, yes, actually, you're dumped. And that's better than guessing for them. That's kind of how I feel. Because again, this is what you're getting out of life. If you're in a relationship and they love you for who you are, and you love them for who they are, who cares about the rest? The labels, the realness of it, like, who gives a shit? Like, maybe love doesn't exist. Maybe there's no such thing as a real woman. Maybe there is. Like, if you're happy with each other, whatever.
Yeah. She knew, and she was very accepting. She was very, she was like, rah, rah, trans rights, and kind of her wanting to, like, I don't want you to be excluded from your community. I was listening to, all the, gender critical things, and she would get into arguments with other lesbians, and I don't identify as a lesbian. I think I'm bi. And so I felt like I was, you're right, taking her identity away or affecting it in some way. And I felt just horribly guilty. We're still super best friends.
I think one of the one of the hard things about when you go through like some really hard traumatic life experiences like that, especially surrounding like who you are, is that you'll develop a tendency to like, well, at least not everyone, but in many cases, and in my experience personally, you develop a tendency of avoiding the opportunity for someone to authentically judge you, like not even giving them the opportunity to say like, do I value you as a trans woman, or is that a problem for me? Because you feel so hard about yourself that you're like, I don't even want to like set up that situation. And I think, unfortunately, as difficult as it is, the only way to get past that fear and that anxiety is to put yourself in situations where you learn that not everyone is going to like hurt you the way other people might have, and that like you have an opportunity to build in your life like a community of people and partners and friendships and all of these things who really love you for you and don't want you to change and don't think anything about you is shameful. And I think that can be really challenging to do and challenging to overcome. And I think it's going to be a nonlinear progress. Like I think you might have like a year where you are kicking ass at this growth and then you slip back to old ways. And I think that is entirely human, and kind of touching back on what we said at the beginning of the call, you absolutely can't judge yourself for that, because we're all doing our best to make do with the hand we were dealt. And sometimes that means people are going to make mistakes. Sometimes that means people aren't going to like do what's in their best interest. And that's okay.
Self-sabotage. I think if you're breaking up with someone who loves you and you love, and if you're watching loads of gender critical content that's saying you're rubbish, that sounds like self-sabotage to me. And it seems like moderate it. Don't run away from arguments. Don't ignore people in relationships. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying that sometimes you can do this stuff to hurt yourself. So don't. And and I guess another thing, like just on this like identity thing of your partner who's a lesbian, like most lesbians are, in my experience and from what I've seen from polls and stuff, support trans rights. But some of them do and some of them don't. That is a fact. And they're going to fucking argue with each other. And you argue with the people you're closest to. Like, trans women argue with each other all the time, I'm sure you know. And cis lesbians argue with each other all the time about everything. Of course they do, because they're the same as every group argues about themselves, especially when they're under lots of pressure, like trans women are today and like lesbians are today. If you break up with your partner, she still then is going to say, well, I'm attracted to some trans women, so fuck you. And then one of her, like, cis lesbian acquaintances is going to be like, that means you're bisexual. And then they're going to fight about it. And that's nothing to do with, that doesn't matter. There's nothing you can do to stop that. You aren't the cause of that. What's the cause of that is two clashing worldviews, one of which is based in reality and the other one which is culty garbage. And that's the result. That's what's going to happen. And you can't punish yourself for that. And like she's like, lesbian is a description. It's not prescription. There's no ontological claim here again. Like she's describing her sexuality. She's only into women. She was into you. Like who cares about the realness of women? It's just a term that they use to describe people. Like when you say I'm a lesbian, people know what that means. It means, oh, you're a woman and you like women. And then they're like, oh, did you know Olivia's a trans woman? They're like, yeah, but it makes sense because that's just what the word means. Like, who cares? Anyway, sorry, I'm ranting off. But I just, my pro tip is who cares and stop self-sabotaging.
Agreed.
Thank you so much. It was so helpful.
Good.
Yeah, thank you, Olivia. I hope you call back and let us know how you're doing on your journey.
Yeah.
If your feelings change. Cool.
I will.
Right.
I love your show.
Oh,
Great.
thank you so much. See you later, Olivia.
That was cool.
Yeah, if Olivia's still watching, I just like that kind of stuff, and like the call with the father of the kid who detransitioned a couple weeks ago, like that kind of stuff really fuels my tank for doing this stuff, because like because our experiences can differ so wildly, it can sometimes feel isolating, even if you're in a room full of trans people, you know, even if you're on a Twitter full of trans people, it can feel, but remembering that there are things and pains, and not that you should connect necessarily and make your identity over pain, but like, I think it does give you like a foundation to understand each other off of when you've experienced similar difficulties. And, it just fueled my tank to remember like why I care about doing this kind of stuff and having these conversations. So thank you to Olivia. Really appreciate you.
Being in a room of trans women and feeling like the odd one out, being on the trans women on Twitter. It's like when they post like just a picture of like a anime cat girl, and they're like, why have you posted a picture of a trans woman? And then like 5,000 replies like, why are you calling me out? And I'm like, I've never seen any anime, and I'm not a cat girl or whatever. I didn't even understand it. But like, you know, don't do it. If that's a meme, if there's any anime cat girls in the chat, like, shout out to you.
Yeah, we love you.